Yeah, welcome to my talk about from menstrual monstering to the cycle as a female superpower. I'm a first-year PhD student, and before I started my PhD, I actually conducted several workshops about opportunities to integrate the menstrual cycle better into work practices or work organization, because I wrote my master's thesis about this, and also based on my experiences as a founder of a female-run game publisher. And doing this practice, I more and more recognized that the negotiation of the menstrual cycle as an embodied experience is kind of in a paradox between different framings. And while the stereotype of the menstrual monster or the pre-menstrual woman as a menstrual monster still exists, the cycle as a female superpower is increasingly marked and staged as something that we just have to manage correctly to achieve a better way of life. So the question that I ask myself is, how do norms, narratives, and practices around the menstrual cycle have changed in recent years, and do they have a transformative potential for ways of living, especially in capitalist societies? And how this changing narrative and practices occur is on a very short and very reduced notice that historically the stereotype of the menstrual monster was set by a lot of philosophers and researchers, like I probably don't have to explain to you. But that then in the recent years, like in starting with the 2010s, roughly, the feminist emancipatory activism has put a lot of effort to remove this taboo and to remove the stereotyping of menstruation, to enable exchange about it and to empower menstruators. And also something like menstrual love occurred. However, norms of menstruation thereby became also more and more paradox. For example, Persist in 2020 created the neologism menstrual normativity to refer to a prevailing social system that still establishes multiple and contradictory norms about menstruation and thereby still categorizes and stratifies women and people with menstrual cycles. And she stated that this results in a paradox that she also described by using the menstrual monster as something that is simultaneously feminine and unfeminine, bleeding too much and too little, and also in too much and too little pain, and so on. So we see that the menstrual monster did not perish through activism, just kind of changed in its experience. And a lot of focus from research and also activism was put on menstrual and the premenstrual phase, but kind of ignored the whole cycle. And in contrast to this ignorance of the whole cycle in research, the public discourse, for example, in popular scientific discourses in magazine articles, guidebooks, or also the first arising independent management consultancy, are more and more concerned with the different phases of the cycle, and also with ideas like cycle awareness or cyclic living. And they try to formulate initial options for other life practices. However, these run the risk of being occupied by capitalistically organized markets, for example, in form of cycle improving dietary supplements, or also guidebooks that state the menstrual cycle as a female superpower for greater productivity, power, and happiness. Like you see one cover of a book, which is quite common in Germany right now, where the menstrual cycle is announced as a feminine path to power, for example. But what's the problem about such a narrative, and how does it kind of change the transformative potential of a feminist menstrual activism? Already Principio and Fast in 2020, for example, staged that menstrual love is conventionally utilizable by capitalist schemas of round-the-month productivity that encourage menstruators to overcome pain and trauma at all costs toward better serving the labor force, and ideas of a contained, non-leaky fit and non-disabled bodies. And my research hypothesis thereby is that a similar thing or a similar risk is in this new narrative of the cycle as a female superpower, Because on the one hand, it might have a potential for empowering and body-aware life practices, but at the same time, there's a huge risk that the personal and individual optimization of the cycle takes precedence, and that thereby coping with symptoms associated with the menstrual cycle is again shifted in the responsibility of an individual into the private sphere again, and thereby also missing the opportunity to actually scrutinize body ignorant to body hostile structures of current life practices. Additionally, the feminist activist empowering potential is absorbed by capitalist meritocratic and also binary sexistic assumptions, and thereby problematic systems like performance-based or growth-oriented life practices are not questioned, but on the contrary, they are strengthened and stabilized because a small privileged group of women who can maybe work according to their cycle takes a greater share in the success. Yeah, and I want to finish actually with my research aspiration, which is kind of to call for a re-invite of the disruptive, subversive, or also transformative potential of menstrual cycle activism that kind of tries to shift the interpretation of the cycle as a superpower for performance and growth, more to a resistance practice against structure that actually are body hostile for us or for women and people who are menstruating. And I have two alternative narratives in my mind, which are still under discussion or reflection. The one is menstruation as a resistant or embodied practice against the pressure to perform, or reclaim PMS as or our response to patriarchy, which I would like to kind of discuss in my research in more detail. Thanks.